just figure out. Yeah, I would say, you know, we've had discussions. Everybody understands, at least we understand why it needs to be done and what the effects are. But we need to figure out some sort of an outreach.
Yeah, they Bob had, an angry house. Bob had an angry homeowner come up and say, wait, this is really my property.
Yeah, well, I think that, I mean, I think it's
Well, I mean, it's
because like,
in a flood zone, I think it's a legitimate concern. They want to see what happens.
Well, I don't,
They chose.
the difference is going to be, I think there is.
I'm not, going.
Oh, no.
I understand.
I think that we just need to explain the consequences and what the effect is. Because if the water comes up and floods your first floor, whether or not you want to stay in it, you roll off the pressure. You need to understand when you're not going to be able to get financing your company or anybody who wants to buy it isn't going to be able to. So, yeah. Not a lot of two people I know are not there. They don't have finance.
Right.
They
Can't have. Right. I mean, right there. Bill Powell's house.
Yeah.
That was before Bill. Yeah. Oh, okay, great. All right, well, this is welcome to the regular scheduled meeting of the Warren Planning Board, Monday, December 20th, before 7. We keep track of it. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Warren Planning Board, Monday, December 20th, 2021. We do have a quorum and I'll call attendance first. Full attendance. And a quorum. All right. There is nothing in the waterfront overlay district development plan review under zoning ordinance article 26. There are no public hearings. And I will now call the meeting to order. First order of business is the approval of the minutes from 11/22/21. Any concerns or comments regarding those minutes?
Andrea had submitted previously some amendments of minutes that Rhonda has, so those will be incorporated. I don't know if anyone else has any other.
Yeah, so. Should we wait then?
No, that's fine. But
Oh, okay. So they're going to get incorporated. All right, great. On that matter, you'll see that number 8 on the agenda is a discussion of meeting minutes, how they're taken. And we have a proposal that we've run by the town solicitor's office about how meeting minutes can go, ways that we can condense them and at the same time make sure we can meet all of our legal requirements and still have a record of what goes on in the meeting. So we'll talk about that after we go through.
With respect to, did you make it a change to the minutes or? And I'm not questioning whether it was good or bad. Like how would we approve that if we didn't see it?
right, and that's, I mean,
So that way, just defer that to the later
Yeah,
discussion.
exactly.
Okay, cool.
So anyway, and we'll talk a bit more about that. Because,
I would say don't vote on the minutes. Let me see.
yeah, I mean, and again, I think after we've had our discussion, that will make more sense in terms of how we're moving forward. Because there's a question as to how much should be included in minutes and, our intent is to make them, is to meet all of the legal requirements and still provide information to people who might be interested. Anyway, I don't want to get too deeply into it. So we'll move along to a review and discussion of the draft elements of the comprehensive plan. I sent you the most recent ones yesterday, but you had and that was really just a change, a brief change in the forward. So the rest of the minutes as you receive them, the rest of the elements as you receive them are the same as you had received earlier in the week. That was really just a reminder. We have Allison Ring here, who's our consultant and principal writer on the comprehensive plan. Our intent here is to go over this. The more we can get a format that we're all comfortable with, the better it is. We've got these draft elements and we also have the forward and the introduction, but I think the guts of this meeting really need to be on our implementation and moving into the draft elements. That said, if you've got any comments on forward or the introduction, anyone?
Yes,
Jim?
I'm gonna go biblical here. In the literary sense, forward should have an E,
Okay.
mean in the beginning. Biblical. But I'm not sure if your intent was actually to be forward in thinking. So I'm not sure which intent you.
Actually, that was Allison's addition to it. I kind of like forward, but I'm open to either way. The purpose of that prose was to set the stage for people who are not going to necessarily go into this in the detail that a state administrator would, but would understand this is an overarching document that deals with a variety of different areas and hopefully encourage them to go a little bit deeper. It's not uncommon for most comprehensive plans to have this kind of an introduction as a means of understanding. It's also a way of, as we saw it, of highlighting some of the major impetuses that will be driving the plan, the market to Metacom and Metacom corridor. At the same time, those things fit within the larger structure. So we didn't want to lose those. We found this to be really an organic process. And by that, I mean, as we've been writing, more comes to mind and it gains volume and strength as it goes along. I think the same thing is going to be true as we go through the draft elements, that there are going to be things that haven't appeared there. For example, the bridge coming across the Kikamuit to link up with the East Bay bike path. There's a safe to school thing. It has to do with transportation, safe bike transportation, safe travel for children, but also a link, an economic link for the town between the West and East. There are open space elements, certainly the Bristol County Water Authority. The land that is going to be essentially given up when the new link takes place will be something that is of significant impact. Where is that land going? Who's taking care of it? Are we going to preserve this as open space, or does it fall to development? So those are just two examples of some things that will come up as we go through the process. And Allison is really a terrific person to have here because she's coming in from a very objective standpoint, and we're coming at it from a very subjective standpoint. And we also have this kind of ancestral memory, at least I do. I'm feeling like an ancestor about things that have happened in the town in the past that still resonate into the present. So, sure.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly sent it to Friday night, but I think now is to get through kind of the substance of the beginning. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
So forward. Okay, anything else on that in terms of the intent, the, red flags that came up just in terms of what's being said, how it's being said, as Andrea said, the language for spelling errors, prepositional phrases, so it's going to that later, but
Yeah, I think it's important. These all require, regardless of how we frame that, these all require states that address.
I didn't get a chance to look at it, Matt. I didn't see it until tonight.
Those two last paragraphs. For my brain, it's.
At this time, do that.
But again, I'll take a look at those. They came in at 2 this afternoon, so I didn't have the chance to look at it because I was busy earlier this afternoon. I think in any of these things, we want to be as open as possible to your thoughts and ideas. So, I don't have a strong feeling. I do about where we're going with this, but again, I'm open to the criticism. And that's, again, I think I'd like to move to unless is there anything else on those? Board introduction. Oh, wow. Oh, that's right, because I thought it was roadkill. I was going to go out and I was going to be cooking up some squirrels, I was into that transportation, these are tied to Medicom, market to Medicom, but I do think that Broken Bridge Safe Schools link would become part of either the Carter plan, is really part of the Carter plan, because you're talking about is the space, and this is going to go across it, allowing a back and forth. And that was a grant that the town won on basis of safe to schools. Yeah. Yeah,
So, can I ask a question about this?
Sure.
I understand that these are the required elements, but the items that are listed here, what are they supposed to be? They're not really bold, so they sort of, what are they?
Are you talking about the, nine
Box.
squares,
Contents,
nine
yeah.
blocks?
Yeah,
Yeah. I was
Allison, I'll let
wondering-
you.
understand. But I'm talking about what are the bullet points below it's supposed to be?
So those are where we're trying to do something a little unique here, focusing on the Arkansas Medicom project. We're looking to link those elements, show how the Arkansas Medicom project is related, relevant to all of these different elements and how like, that implementation supports the policy.
Then I think you probably need to put some heading on it that says what it is.
Yeah,
Because I couldn't, I mean, I saw that they were sort of related to it, but I think we need to understand.
so
Well, this be something that you would appear with each section of the overall comprehensive plan? Like, would you like have these 9 blocks again and then have bullet points specific to that particular section?
So, to get to that, right, so I was thinking of having it within the introduction, almost like it was introduction, and it, this last sentence of the introduction talks about college or how the decision of the I think you're right.
This is how the elements relate to the Medicom to market.
And then as far as within each of the elements, so you have your policies table, so what, the content here, much of it, all of it.
Translate into. Yeah, yeah.
You can have the final, all the language in those policies, we'll go back and make a final version of this that will, that should be consistent.
I look at this, I'm not gonna agree with the what is it about? Here's the trying to get it up. Right, it was really interesting. It's very clear to me what the intent is. And I think for the general public, they're not gonna read the document. We should be able to read this, understand. That's exactly what I want. And a hard time understanding how these are made.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds to me what you're describing is just an abstract of a full report. That's all that is. It could be 2 pages. You could put it right after the table of contents. You have a section 2, whatever, transportation, and then a paragraph about what's gonna be in that section. It's an abstract of the section. And so I could read those 2 pages and know exactly what's gonna be there. And not have to read the whole document if I didn't want to. That seems to me, that's what we're trying to do here, and that's perfectly reasonable. An executive summary, right, so it's, you got a table of contents, which is literally just the title and what page it's on, and then the executive summary. Is just basically the same thing, except you've got a paragraph explaining the particular heading.
But this particular table relates to the relationship to Medicom to
It's the whole town, just downtown, it's housing, space preservation.
Okay.
Because again, there's a specific piece of understanding.
I have a question. Fred or Bob, maybe somebody can refresh my memory, and I asked this question because it's not clear. I think I remember a conversation at our last meeting about, the section that includes the preservation partners and how possibly
there was some concern about, you know, the nature of these partners and how they may not be in existence in 10 years or whatever the case may be, and whether we should be including them in the form they were included. I'm looking at the current draft, and it doesn't look like those would change in any way. So I suppose my question is, remind me of what our conversation was. Did we agree to change that, or was that sort of just something that was discussed?
Where
I
are
think it
they?
is because it says appendix, so it was like, they were basically taken out and put into an appendix.
Yeah, we put
It's
it
just
in-
it reads in,
I see.
the appendix sort of reads at the end of it because it's all related to that particular category, I
We
guess.
didn't, you know, and again, this is a little tricky because we had said, you know, like, okay, well, one group, you know, was dormant for 20 years and then somebody came along and woke it up. No, I'm not going to mention any names, Mike. But that was, you know, that was, and in a very positive way. And then we had the multiplicity of historic preservation organizations that exist in the town. And we had said, you know, calling them out in the document itself detracts from the fact that this is an action document. But they're certainly partners in it. The one thing we did say was that it would be a hell of a lot more efficient and effective from a monetary and an effort standpoint if these folks could pull themselves together, particularly the historic preservation people, on what it is that is going on, and so there's a more centralized format that both the town could deal with and that people of Warren could understand, because I still have a hard time. So,
All right, so is it fair to say that this new document reflects the conversation that we had at the last board meeting?
yeah,
So could I ask one more we might add, which is the Snows Heritage Area. It's not listed here, and yet that's quite active.
again, I think, you know, what was listed, we did have songs in the, it's not that, that's not the the Dave Lee
But as
thing.
you're listing partners, I mean, they're putting up signage around town, and Dave Lee is very active, so I consider adding them to the partnerships.
Yeah,
The Snows
absolutely.
Heritage Area, where they're 501c3, just to meet all of the basic standards.
One last question, just because the page numbering for this document has like, it's page 6, the appendix, but that will actually be at the end of the whole big document with Molly, or would it be an appendix after each section?
I've never seen it in so I think it's. Now, how you think about it?
Yeah, I prefer to see it at the end,
Everything in the other.
the appendix. But any other groups that you can think of, I mean, I frankly don't know where all these came from, but I agree, Mike, I think, you know, they've got a brochure. It's called the Psalms Heritage.
Snows Heritage Area.
Okay, and we talked about the signage, and we have a paragraph on song in the, appendix, so I just also took that conversation.
One thing that, I was not quite sure where it came from, I mean, but it makes sense to me. Is this the potential unintended consequence of drawing an investment away from historic downtown?
When I was going through the different elements of trying to see how so it may not be a concern, something that, you know, maybe
No, it makes sense. But I did think it's something we should talk about because, I mean, I didn't think of that until you presented it. That my concern is that it may set up alarm bells that don't need to be there. Bob, your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I just.
No, but yeah, that's,
So probably less number of times I would say it's already, they, I mean, it's already that wrong, showing. So, if, not being in fact, but I think depending on what goes there, if what they call like that popular center, they've got the spirit, want to get there, may draw some. Yeah, that makes something, you know, you kind of think of all the things, so that you can plan for it.
No, I agree.
So I think it's essentially, what was in this one?
I think you've got a very different, Metacom is as easy as we can make it to get to, is never gonna have the charm and the ease of movement that, downtown does. It is gonna be in some way an island of sorts, that is going to be residential as well. So in many ways, it's going to be feeding this group of people who are not there already. So we're not, and the people that we're moving are not necessarily, I mean, I don't know that we are moving people from Market to Metacom, but I don't think it would impact the way the mall did the downtown in Providence. I mean, that was really sucked the life out of downtown for a time. And the fact is, downtown is now coming back and the mall's dying.
I think that the straight cases, initially, there's no guarantee that anybody.
Right.
Right now, we're seeing
You might, my recommendation would be that we would downplay that particular point. One thing though that this does bring up as well is the National Grid property that runs parallel to Metacom. There's a right of way that National Grid owns, and a number of years ago we talked about turning that into a pathway, which should this, as Metacom becomes Metacom development becomes a reality, that would become even more important as a means of linking the rest of Warren to this Metacom area, because it goes right behind there, I'm assuming, that National Grid. Yeah, so it was intended as a bike pedestrian corridor. It's the National Grid right of way. And that was supposed to create a kind of regional connection. Very expensive to build the decking, because it's all wetland. Yeah, there's a lot, a good deal of wetland. But I think that's, important to mention, as is the connector, because those are things that would help tie this together and would be part of that kind of comprehensive view.
So as an action item, development trails on the connection along. Things there.
I mean, I'm not, I guess, the rec. Okay, well, why don't we go through the, yeah. I want to chat with you about, have that discussion about the rec plan. Anything else on the historic and cultural resources? What we tried to do is prioritize the policies here. Any thoughts about those concerns?
Which one are we talking about now, Fred?
Draft comprehensive plan, historic and cultural resources, just down from the
Page 4.
To like the policy and implementation action, that's probably like key.
this thing right here.
Under page 2.
Yes.
I did have one addition to the appendix R2. Its point is owned by the Warren Land Conservation Trust. And if you're interested, you could add one other piece of their property which will have trails, which is called Stone Meadow Preserve. It's also on Market Street, with a parking lot and trails. It's owned by the Warren Land Conservation Trust.
Yeah, I send that to Bob and me, we can pass that on down.
That would go on the recreation, now this one, property.
Somebody acquired. So now on the policies and implementation. I wonder if it's worth noting that the town should support the land trust bond that they traditionally have, so that they have funds when there is an open space property that becomes available.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but the open space bond is something they've traditionally done here, have they not?
What was the open space bond that you're referring to, you're saying that the statewide?
No, the town. And town had $500,000 that it could spend. It spent it, in fact, on the National Grid property. That one, no, actually, the bond was approved, and then the town council could spend it. So I'm just saying, we need to note that the town should be involved in the funding when critical open space becomes available. Sure, I understand.
Just generally. Recommendation that the town should be.
How about the open space committee, which is now dormant? Do you suggest that it be reinvigorated? Well, but the item here is preserve open space through land protection and encouraging infill development.
Well, there's two things in there, so, yeah, that's. You're talking about the recreation and conservation open space element, which is also phase two.
Oh, I see.
You said, what PDF page are
So I think you want to have historic preservation.
Yeah, I wanted to, do it in order.
I have your comments already written down for the.
Yeah, I think, one of the things, Mike, that we talked about the last time, was the possibility of creating a fund that would be ongoing, and would have enough flexibility so that it could be used for affordable housing, it could be used for open space. Wasn't that, it?
We haven't dedicated.
But we had talked about the fact that we would want to potentially open that up so that it was a bit more flexible.
The trust fund is specific.
And I thought we said that we would have to go to the state to ask them if we could, for example, if you get money from every sale, the way that Little Compton does, for every land sale, we would be able to.
That recommendation, that action item.
Right. Yeah, I mean, what I'm speaking to is Mike's concern, is there a fund you can go to? Because the last thing you want to be doing is, here comes the wrecking ball, we need a bond,
I mean, the other potential source of money to use that is tax and finance. You're not at all, this is very specific purpose. That money has to go for a level.
right.
Land conservation.
For affordable housing, I mean,
So I wasn't here, I'm sorry, last time, but this historic district commission issue, have you decided you don't want to move towards a mandatory situation?
well, it's mandatory for downtown already. Apparently that happened in 2013. What we were asking for the opt-in was for houses outside the historic district that are over 100 years old, because currently the way that the ordinance was produced was it's mandatory for every house that's over 100 years old in the town.
It's already mandatory.
Yeah. And neither was the town council.
Well, a lot of language that's voluntary online, and that's why I have it in the document.
Right, yeah, we had this, we met with Alice, I mean, it's, because it says voluntary historic district commission, it indicates that it's voluntary, but it is in fact not voluntary.
So you need to clarify the ordinance?
Well, I think what we need to do is stop using the word voluntary.
So, as a priority action item is to review and update records.
I got it.
So, for that,
The opt-in element for other parts of the town seems like a pretty cool idea, because frankly, the town, the building inspector wasn't doing the damn thing about that. I mean, and I'm not faulting him, it wasn't on anybody's radar screen. Anything else on the historic and cultural resources before we move to recreation?
Question that I had, services that strikes me as a mix of stuff that talks about I think it starts getting into
Where are you?
yeah.
Oh,
We agree on this.
No, I, we're on historic and cultural resources, correct? Oh, okay, yeah, no, if you can hold that for a moment, Matt. Till we get there. So my concern would be HC7 under that historic cultural resources. That was the potential unintended consequences. So just think, ideally we could deal with that differently, or the fact that it could link to the existing downtown. No, I don't either. I'm just saying, when I read potential unintended consequence, that sends up a red flag in my mind. Yeah. Yeah, that's again, because it's a valid concern, and it reflects.
Like it's leveraging all areas of the town.
Right. Now in the narrative for that comprehensive and cultural resources, is that where you were, Matt?
Yeah.
Okay. The only thing I'd say in the second page of that, it begins of the former Warren Manufacturing Company, known as American Tourister. There are two paragraphs below that. I'd be inclined to just switch the positions of those two, so that due to a recent ordinance passed in 2020, as opposed to the robust art scene, it just feels like it's more within the context of the, the art scene is a nice thing to have, but it's not necessarily a specific thing that's going on the way that ordinance, the utilization tax. And then, volunteer funds make a lot of sense there. So, anything more there? Are we ready to move to recreation, conservation, open space? Bob, you okay with that? Anybody else? Any concerns? I know Mike, you wanted to just make sure that, that Solom's thing, I'll do that as well. But, and also the properties.
There's something in the narrative. Yeah, I'm still stretching the wall. As I look at this document, I'm directly applying like
Yeah, I have to take a look at it. I mean, I will tell you that this is so much more concise than most comprehensive plans now. I mean, we were referring to what this one page of HC1 to HC7 usually takes about 12 to 15 pages. Is really a concentration of information.
might need to add a little bit. Start downtown.
Yeah, no, I mean, Water Street is definitely.
They're both approximated.
So that would be something you could provide to Allison, the specifics of the Water Street vulnerability. Now the recreation and, yeah. Is this, I know that there was a recreation plan that was done with a consultant. And that's an area, that's built into this, I'm assuming?
Discussed in reference.
Right.
Some of it, I guess,
Right.
some of the recommendations, like, invest.
The recreation plan, is that ever, I mean, where does that stand now? If we include it in an appendix, is that, I'm concerned about the force of law behind recommendations
Yeah,
and
I
that.
think, less than.
Well, I want to be very careful that we're not putting an approval on it without knowing exactly what it says, because I mean, I did take a look. Right.
And you don't want it to become
Right.
in that, like if somebody takes.
Yeah. Yeah, let me, some of for the members of the board who are not familiar with this, the Recreation Department essentially had a plan go out, and a couple of people apparently made decisions about where playing fields would go throughout the town. And that then went to a consultant and they came up with a pretty big plan. And now, you know, and we want to be very careful. I mean, there were some recommendations in there that would destroy habitat, that would cut across. I mean, there was, in fact, at one point, there was a field being developed as an athletic field based on this plan that had no approvals for it. So I want to be very careful that this doesn't.
Yeah, I don't think it's not.
Yeah, I want to be sure that we say that this has this isn't a legal document. I mean, I think it's important to be explicit about what this plan is. You know, some of the other appendixes are fine, you know, it's like, hey, there's the Warren Land Conservation Trust. We're not endorsing the Warren Land Conservation Trust. It's inexistent, but that plan has very specific areas mapped out that are going to become athletic fields, for example. And I want to be real sure that we're not. But, and beyond that, I want to say we're not endorsing.
Okay, may I chime in? So perhaps, I feel you, I forget what you're saying. Perhaps it's a situation where the solicitor can inform what the definition of a comprehensive plan is generally. And what it means legally, and just we can include some sort of, you know, here's the intention of our comprehensive plan, and here's what it means, and here's, by the way, what it doesn't mean under the law. I suspect that comprehensive plan is basically, you know, going to sort of just bear the planning board's vision, proposing to make decisions in the future. I don't think that it endorses any particular legal action.
We'll talk about
So, yeah.
zoning.
And so I'm just saying, if there's any concern about that, I would refer to the solicitor to give us language that we could feel comfortable including in you know, the introduction or whatever it may be.
Good.
That's good idea.
Great. Okay, yeah. I know, but, you know, here we are, we've gone through, you know, how many meetings as a result of that, you know, somebody saying, well, wait a minute, it's right here, because some planner from, you know. No, I know. So, and that's the kind of crap that occurs when, I mean, it's like, as Jim pointed out, in 2018, the town committed a recreation and parks master plan that analyzed the existing and future and recreational needs. When somebody says a recreation and parks master plan, that says to me that that's the master plan, that's in place. And if the town council has voted on it in any way, shape, or form, it gives it a certain amount of gravitas. And I just want to make sure that, you know,
I don't have that concern based on the current plan. There, what I'm trying to do is, again, because of the requirement on the comprehensive plan, that analysis. So that's been done, right? So I wanted to utilize that for, trying to say, well, we did the analysis and give sort of check that box, but also a lot of what the narrative is comprehensive plan says is that there are already that document done. And so within the policy implementation act, it talks about, it says update the recreation department, but to make it consistent with the market's medical care and reevaluate site recommendations. That's going to be some communication. This
yeah, no, I mean, and I appreciate that. I mean, it definitely is in there. It's just, you know, that Settlers Green was a good example because, you know, we had people walk in here and say, well, wait a minute, you know, the town said this at one point. And I you know, I think Brett's point of getting the town.
I would surmise that something, solicitor is gonna tell us something like, you know, someone reading this plan should not construe this as prior approval to develop any particular development without going through the normal planning and zoning board process. You know, that,
That's the solution.
If you
you know,
have proposals. Probably look at it. We talk about and parties. Something that's being used, say,
Right. I mean, the other thing though is like that field that is not a matter of sea level rise or resilience. That's just in a neighborhood.
I
And
mean, I would just add another, add on beyond just vulnerability, that other inconsistency that's in that plan too.
right, I mean, I think Brett's language
Yeah.
is, you know,
That's looking like a lawyer. Imagine that.
no, but it's, and really well, you know, I mean, I think it's very important because this is one of the dangers of making market to Medicom. You know, we want to be sure that we don't have some outliers there that don't necessarily fit within market to Medicom, but are still protected. You know, that open space in the western section of the eastern section of Warren, you know, Bird Swamp Road, Illicit, that area.
I think the only thing that I would say that I would acknowledge in that plan, the one thing that was very obvious is they did a plan on Warren for a regional subdivision. And so the plan is only, the master plan is only for Warren, but they're talking a lot about the schools and things like that. And use, but to take into account that, you know, so that our land use here should be assessed the land use of
Bristol.
communities that are going into that's so it needs assessment. They, yeah. Right, so.
Right.
But that was the
But I-
reason. That's why they needed more fields. Those fields all the time because they were too flat. And so that I think is one reason that I saw when I read that.
Yeah.
And we want to address.
That's R3 that Bob's referring to. The implementation action, incorporate open space dedication or payment in
Just
lieu of.
like we're doing with, things. This requirement. Are on that.
R4 or R4A, I would include that in our transportation element as well. That's one of those good, you know, kind of time together things. And specifically, you know, bicycles and pedestrians. But I think that was a large part of the Medicom corridor plan too, was the idea that you're creating a bike lane. So that, you know, the more we're able to bring in that bicycle friendly town. Yeah, no, it's great. Makes me hungry, I gotta say. Yeah, right. When they cook up that squirrel.
I just have one question, on the R2A section where it's talking about it says, reevaluate site recommendations and investment space for future potential inundation due to sea level rise. Is there a specific, you know, like if you were looking at the Fuss O'Neill presentation and stuff, it would do the, you know, the 100-year plus big storm scenario, which was a significant more property. So is there like a clear guideline as to what properties would be targeted in what manner? Or is it like, are we speculating a full 9 feet or, you know, what I mean? I'm just trying to get an idea as far as how people in that area of town would interpret this with respect to their property. I know it's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that it's a recreation question. With respect to recreation, Daniel's Garden is going to be underwater. Sure.
Well, like with Jimmy Park as an example, if it was 3 feet, you could repurpose, you could do something that is 3 feet. If it was 8 feet, you're not building up Jimmy Park to 8 feet, you know what I mean? So it's like,
that area is captured.
well, when it comes down to reevaluating investments, is that going to translate into? Okay, right. I know, I understand. I'm just saying, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that, you know, that it's a bit of a tangent, but it does need to be addressed. And because of the attention that's been placed on Markets Medicom, there are people, as you know, Jim's talked to them, Tyler's talked to them, who live in that area and are now freaked out because they're not clear on the timing or what's happening. I mean, obviously, I mean, the folks who are working on it, who are closer to it, know a little bit, you know, that this is not going to happen tomorrow.
I would suggest that anybody applying for any kind of institutional finance, probably, you got anything on Markets Medicom, find out the cost of flood insurance. That would, we're not letting some genie out of the bottle.
I know.
Genie's way out of the bottle. The people that have been complaining to me, they don't have, I've lived there for 35 years, or it's been in my family for 100. Even borrowed a day. So, I mean, that's, people don't believe it. I mean, that's the flood insurance premium is going to tell you what kind of problem. I mean, that's the simplest answer. I don't want to get off on that too much. But, you know, we did nothing, just said we're going to wait until what happens. But anybody that's going for any kind of institutional financing in that area, if they can get it, we're going to find a hefty premium for flood insurance. Because those premiums just went up. In that area, independent of anything the town reported, been identified by experts all across the country and the state. So most of the properties in the state are on that.
There's an ArcGIS map, I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah. No,
You know, that definitely is an eye opener.
I mean, we say 2035, it could be 20. We could have 100-year storm next week. I mean, that's, you know, we're just using that based on data historically, extrapolating that. Like, the whole purpose of that was FEMA and NOAA maps look at 100, 500-year scenarios. I told you, you know, grandma, based on FEMA maps, that would be responsible. I mean, I purposely wanted to draw a line and say we should look at 35 with this 14 years. The problem that we have with that is that lenders and insurance companies have not been part of the conversation to validate what we're saying. So the bank is not going to give you a 30 or 40 based on the play. That should be applicable.
No pun intended, but it's going to be a perfect storm at one point in time. You're not only going to have lenders and insurance companies, but you're also going to have the practical effect of a market rejecting that area. You're not going to be able to trade your property either in or out.
40% of the properties, residential and commercial, are not owner occupied. Owned by people in the state. obviously. So the risk that we fear is there's a strong potential that those people just walk. So now we have the environmental. But what happens to those residents there? You know, the land doesn't just care what happens to them.
So, you know, but again, we'll get back to that, certainly in housing, and economic development, but, within the recreation, I'll take a look at this as well. I mean, I think master planning process identified the critical need for new and refurbished athletic facilities. You know, I think we need to be very careful about adjectives, you know, critical need or adverbs. You know, critical need suggests that we're in some kind of a crisis, and there's also a keep pace with increasing participation rates. I don't know if that's actually true.
Well, I think, you know, one of the suggestions would be instead of investing money to expand, like invest money to save.
Right, and improve it. I mean, they're saying here, you know, properties to address the poor playing condition and lack of venues. I mean, based on this, you would think, you know, we don't have a functioning baseball field or a soccer field in town, or a tennis court or anything else. And I mean, that's just not true. So I want to be very careful, you know, that our language doesn't echo the kind of language that was used to create a kind of, you know, scare scenario. Well, we have to do this because we don't have enough. And as Ashley said, we're not talking about just one, we're talking about a regional school system. So that needs to be noted here, that this doesn't fall all on our shoulders. I mean, that's an incredible
personal would like it.
yeah. So I just think that again, you know, I hate to feel like I'm, you know, banging this, but it's, you know, clearly you know, at Jamie's Park is a problem, but so is any of the other issues in terms of where these things were picked out. Andrea? I'm sorry, where are you?
R1B, page 2.
Oh, over here.
That it all requires changes. So I think you have to look at where else would you allow higher density. Any area outside of medical. Yeah, or market. No public infrastructure. Very difficult. Plus, the idea is you want to turn that over to safe recreation area. Don't have to. So, you know, I mean, at some point, we could be a total build something. That happens. That happens. But that's, okay, that's an art. That's
Well, could you, to Andrea's point, could we talk about other appropriate areas where that zoning could be applied? So that we're not limiting ourselves to Medicom. There's no other place where redevelopment can take place in the town?
136 corridor.
So then in other appropriate areas such as the 136 corridor then.
Right, I mean, I don't think we're going to expand beyond that. But it's next to the same one.
Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's multi-family, there's like.
You have to, I mean, I think the difficulty run is where is that going to be? So you said, one lot, undeveloped, subdivisions, one up next there. Now you get into potentially like spot zoning. Okay, there's potentially, Main Street where it's. Yeah, I just think, as I look at the town, I just don't know where those areas are. Yeah, I'm not against it, I just don't know where they.
I would just like to leave it open. I wouldn't want to close it off. I would think this is like. So during the,
Factory, some of that over, yeah, I think that's potentially. Houses and. Manufacturing,
I'm sure.
I'm scared. Yeah, maybe you just. Body,
Yeah, so, the addition of other appropriate areas like 136, the same kind of approach could potentially help. I mean, I'd be inclined to say, have a caveat in there saying, meet that those appropriate areas, like an asterisk that says you have to have infrastructure, you have to have transportation, otherwise you have, some knucklehead saying, well, Settlers Green makes sense because it's out in.
It says because he owns it.
Well, Neff was actually the town planner who used to work there. So. Oh, boy. Okay, anything more on the recreation, conservation, open space? How about the Harbor Commission? Would they fit under this headline?
Anything, yeah, or, public services, that probably some of their operations might go in there, but certainly they still.
I mean, the harbor management plan, I'm assuming is going to be, they're working on it now. And but that's another one we want to take a look at because
Probably one of the. Good side there, and switch that for.
but like mooring fields are determined according to where swimming areas are located. I mean, that is one of the things that we have here in Warren. We have a beach, and where people can swim versus where the boats are, and docks are a function, I would think, of recreation. And that's another plan that I like.
Yeah, yeah. The first phase of restoration of the zone. Docks.
The other thing is the, right of way that are CRMC designated. Those are, clearly recreational opportunities.
as far as data, yeah. Okay, so I found, you know.
Was, one thing, like what you mentioned about the second phase of the town wharf, you know, from a long-term recreational standpoint, I don't know if it would be something or this point or whatever, where it would like encourage the businesses to, you know, participate in do. I know Blount is doing that. They actually have docks to like encourage waterfront people to go to their restaurants and try, and the Wharf new restaurant, they encourage that now too, to try to have like, you know, more, yeah, more transient voting, you know, not just limited to our own wharf, but like the whole
And that's
thing
one
around it.
thing we've looked at for
Yeah.
the second phase is that. Bad, right? Docks.
Oh, right, right. Now, right, right. Because when he was referring to the difference of like, how would we adversely avoid adversely impacting that area with Medicom, it's a, almost a non-competing because it is a waterfront, you know, retail base that's- would be elevated by overall economic change.
In Appendix R2 of the inventory, I'd like to see the development rights, the farms whose development rights have been purchased. There's 3 or 4 of them. Okay.
There might be someone I could like check in, make sure I'm not missing anything. I help it. Have an Excel spreadsheet. Properties that I know. Well, yeah, so we're helping open space, so the other area. Some of it go here, also naturally. Farmland, the state has that stuff that economic development. That's one. I mean, not.
Yeah, no,
Not active.
no, I get it. Yeah, because I mean, open space suggests that you could recreate in it, whereas development rights purchased from farms doesn't give people the right to walk onto that land.
So the people,
As
you know,
someone will
the
tell you.
people that have, you know, like public access, like categorize the state as recreation, open space, farmland, and then a column that says public access.
Right.
So I'm trying to get there.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, no, yeah, I mean, I'd like to see these things appearing as many times as possible, because then it, you know, reinforces the idea of a comprehensive plan that is interrelated.
As opposed to a sort of comprehensive
Sure.
development.
I'm sorry, what?
It takes the development question off of those.
Right. Right. I mean, I think that the use of Medicom is really a key element, and as Allison said in her earlier comments, this is a unique way of approaching a comprehensive plan. But it really is, and I think that's going to wake people up, much the same way, by the way, on a side note, Bob recently we received an award for this market to Medicom from the Rhode Island Association.
Rhode Island, Department of American Players Association.
And so,
Congrats, Bob.
way to go, Bob.
I still had to pay for coffee.
Hey, that makes no sense.
I know, we said reward, I'm like, oh, thank you.
Public employee.
No, yeah. Yeah, I'd be driving a Rolls Royce before too long.
I got an attaboy.
Yeah, but, you know, again, I think it's being recognized across a wide variety. I mean, I was just looking at NOAA that they were talking about resilience, and they have these names of people who were at this meeting, and I was thinking, where's Bob? You know,
Well, I mean, to that point, Federal White House has a vehicle. Definitely have some traction.
well, the beauty part here too is that we're putting it into the context of the larger community. So it doesn't look like an academic exercise. It isn't an academic exercise. It's something that has the impact across the entire community. We're, you know, this is one of the beautiful things about Warren is our diversity within this tiny little space that we've got. Anything else on the comprehensive plan to date? I would say, Allison, you know, great job in terms of responding to the concerns that we had the last time. Allison and Bob and I met for a meeting as well, talked about this. All that said, your input is welcomed, and, you know, send it to us. I'll share, Matt, yours with Allison. You know, I think it's important that if something comes to mind, send it to us in an email. That, you know, like Ashley, you know, the business of the fact that we've got a regional high school and we're looking at playing fields, you know, from only one side of that region, needs to go into the comprehensive plan. We're linked to Bristol because of that regional school system. That, it's not just, oh, it would be nice if we did something with Bristol, or it would be nice if we did something with Barrington. We're wedded to them economically. I mean, there's a really strong link between these two towns, and something like the National Grid corridor too would be something that would tie us together. I mean, certainly market to Medicom Avenue is going to impact them. Anything we do there. Bob already heard from the town planner over there when we were talking about putting in that apartment complex that we approved. You know, they said, don't make a decision. They called them up the night before, or that day.
I might have been.
But, you know, that it points to the importance of that kind of regional connection, certainly between our two towns.
That's our part of the 5 year.
Yeah, I mean,
Thing just brought up, I think I'm very encouraged that recently, for a long time, that I have posted. Working with that planner and very. State. And down there, she's been involved with resilience.
Great.
Last thing on that is, I mean, this past summer, on the plane, that was my family. They brought in 6 different universities. similar to what we're doing. So that's regular focusing on their kids today. Gonna be one of those projects.
Oh, wow. Huh.
We're gonna have architectural students.
Yeah.
They did an 8-minute day. Better than any call. That's just gonna be our opportunity for us. Not just focus on our planning, but just these ways to go.
Now, if we could get Bezos and Musk to start putting their money into, affordable housing and planning as opposed to, sending people up into space so they can spend 5 minutes.
Ancestry.com to see if I had any Schmitz.
All right, so I guess, I'm hoping that this has been helpful, and more elements the next time. Great, thank you so much, Allison. We appreciate your work on this and appreciate everybody's input. Thank you very much. The last item on the agenda is the meeting minutes. Here's the thought. What we've had up until now is a kind of hybrid. We get some comments, but not all of them. And that leads to some confusion. Well, what actually occurred? According to the law, the things that we need to have is the date of the meeting, the number of people who were here, who wasn't here, what decisions were made. That's the sum total. Those 4 elements are what the meeting minutes are supposed to include. Beyond that, who says what at various times is not mandated within the meeting minutes.
But you have that in some way.
Sure.
So I think Trevor's right on in terms of requirements, the time, the attendance is not there. And people always, it's just that any one member of anybody, public requests a certain information minutes, 5 minutes. So we talked about what's the need to this board, all the issues. With that is, I think, is that that all recordings now 100%. So it's just a matter of maybe getting a decision for it that way. And all of that, what the zoning board does. Right, so the person there recording exactly what's going on. Money's not really costing to hospitals. But I suggest not going after a lot of maybe conditions, major elements. If somebody there to want it, it's going to be those zoning. So that's just policy, it's kind of what the one is, how they want to proceed. My recommendation is just make sure we have a formal, law.
And, feel from this board to the big expense report, actually have it record transcribed. That would be Tom's or some of the other. It really is just a neat process to have the board here. That kind of thing.
And just want to back on that, it's a joint board. Record. So it's not on the record. It's back here, so that's the one that we're going to. It's written, it's warning, that's what they have.
One of the thought that I had too was that if there is a dissenting vote, when we take a vote, that is presented. That if someone's dissenting, here's the reason that I'm dissenting, not just I have an undigested bit of mustard. I'm dissenting because of this. I think that's important. All of our decisions should be thoughtful. And if we approve something, we have to we go through a fairly lengthy process of the decision, as we've made that clear now. Not only we meet all of the aspects that Ben had in that note that he gave us, but also we have to be sure that we're saying, for example, if you do this, here's the consequence for that, to protect us against situations where we thought we had an agreement in a meeting that didn't. So that would be, I would ask for that as the chair, as part of that process, where you would say, I asked that this be put into the minutes, the reason that there was this dissent. And it's not a punishment. I mean, quite often, if you're looking at, for example, the Supreme Court nowadays, those dissenting opinions are very important and represent the way that a number of people are thinking. So, I think it's really more a matter of respect for the dissenting opinion to have that appear. So that's the concept that we're.
So do the minutes have to include the findings of fact?
Yes, because it's.
Part of the decision.
So it's what the decision is and what the findings of fact are.
Like Fred's saying, so if you agree with the motion is, in that motion, you have all the findings of fact. Now, if you disagree, you got to give all the findings of fact as to why you disagree, what the other parties are saying. And again, we just had to come down to security law and zoning. And, three members were very, one member was very articulate in describing the finding of fact. Two of the other members supported that, meaning I agree with the finding of fact. And two other members who said nay. Yeah, when they called on a comment, and they basically said, it fits there. That was problematic. The judge pointed out, well, honestly, that's not enough. You got to say, I don't agree because this is what was, yeah, it's why I don't think that's the way.
I think what's happening is that I'm getting some error. We're not getting all of it, or then that doesn't even need to be a son transfer.
Right, I totally agree with you. I think that a lot of times that happens because we have this portion of the minutes, like these kind of discussions, and we're trying to transcribe that for us. And they end up, right, and it's like, it's just this long, with this, is like, we discussed, that would be how I would put it in there. This was the time period. But,
Well, I don't really get the policy of this.
There goes Bob's raise. Well, that's the key to this.
revenue stream maker.
Like that decision they were just referring to was the one that we had come before us, and we made a positive recommendation to the zoning board, where a guy wanted to build a house with an in-law apartment. It all looked like it fit. And because they couldn't get a majority, it was denied. That cost the town money.
That's
And-
the one that got renamed back.
Right. And so, this is, as not only volunteers on this board, but as taxpayers, that goes up my spine, that somebody is making a decision where town money that could go more effectively to the salaries of, effective town employees is instead going to legal fees to fight something that never should have been fought in the first place. And that's one of the reasons why Ben's and Tony's opinions are so important in these meetings. I've been on the planning board for many years, and before I got here, there were a number of cases, at least 4, where the planning board made decisions like that one, and the town not only had to fight it, but lost. That shouldn't happen on our watch. So,
Brett Bobian here, for the record. I have
I left.
some feedback. So I agree with a lot of what was just said. And in terms of making a record at a meeting where there is a hearing with any testimony, with exhibits, that rely on a record, I think that not only should we have a stenographer, but we should also identify ourselves when we speak. Because right now, I would surmise that this recording equipment, maybe I'm wrong, is not sophisticated enough for the microphone to pick up the speaker, and that my name tag that's here is also associated with the digital recording. Is that correct?
Right, people are,
So-
but then you watch one of the
Yeah.
previous ones. In several minutes at a time, I'm like, for myself.
Who's talking?
I'm like sitting right here, go to myself where I'm like, shoot, just get that, it's, big decision. And reality.
Yeah.
Might be a little bit trouble there, so I agree.
And so from my own experience in doing the job I do, I oftentimes have to order audio recordings of a trial and listen to it and then determine, what I'm going to do with the case from there. And a lot of times that requires hiring the transcription company to go and transcribe the audio. But the problem is there was no one in the room, so the speakers are not always identified, and it becomes problematic to figure out who said what at what time. We have 9 members, whatever, right? So that's an issue. I don't think we need a steno when there's no hearing with testimony, but I do think it would be a better practice for all of us to identify ourselves, even when there's no hearing, when we're just relying on the recording, whenever a decision is going to be made. And if we're going to take a vote on something, I think it's also perfectly fair to state our reasons if we're going to dissent. I mean, it might not be legally required, but if you're going to take a position, in my mind, you should be able to explain it. I don't think there's anything wrong with asking any of us to do that, whether it's up or down, right? So I think it would be better record keeping, and certainly for any meeting with testimony and a record, we should have a stenographer here. I think it's a good use of our funds. So that's what I got to say about that.
I agree. Anything else?
So if you're gonna hire a stenographer, does that require a change in the budget for the town council?
No idea.
We cut 20 things for the next.
Trying to make sure.
And we have had a stenographer here for some planning board meetings, I remember. I don't know, I wasn't chairman, so I wasn't privy to why we had them and didn't have them. But yeah, it makes sense because it's really too much to ask, somebody who's not a professional to be taking notes.
And then,
That would start with, not for the year.
yeah,
So they try to identify yourself, right, when you put in house, what you put yourself in there. Control the flow of information at times we, if I say something, I'll say something, it's a big motion.
Yeah.
Serve a couple purposes, no doubt.
sure. And then in terms of the meeting minutes, I agree that we should be, less is more with something like that. Do whatever is required. As soon as you start getting into narratives that this was discussed and et cetera, well, if you're not going to record the whole thing, then you're just causing problems by putting in some summary. So I think it's better to just do whatever the solicitor said is the legal requirement.
Great.
That would be my position on that.
Could I have a motion to, we'll put this in a more formal,
I'll put it on the agenda.
okay, and then we take the vote at that point. But moving forward,
Like, should we have an application in January that requires whatever
okay. And I like Brett's idea too. I mean, I think it's important that we say, Massey or whatever, so that we could make up names.
Right.
That was one. All right, moving right along. That's it. Any comments from board members? Hearing none, could I have a motion to adjourn? Second? Ashley? Jim Patterson made the motion. All in favor? Aye.